Hello, friends. So I finally played an old walking simulator by the name of Gone Home. Now, I was part of the controversy in this that I did not like it. At the time of release, I thought it was a mockery of video games, and really, this genre brings out the worst of video games. What I'm talking about is walking simulators. They really should be used as a test video game. For example, if you wanted to make a video game, I think Gone Home is a first great game. You can make walking simulators fairly simple using 3D assets, and it helps you get to know and understand the engine. But as a full fledged game, it's very lacking. It's a story driven game, which isn't bad in itself, but when the game is the narrative and the exploration of the house, which brings you more pieces of the story, you need to have one, a very good story. Two, you need to have good twists in the story in order to captivate things. And three, you need memorable characters. Oftentimes in media, we don't really remember the stories at all. We have a loose understanding of the overall plot, but most of the details get lost to time. No one really remembers stories as written, but what we often remember are characters. For example, Lord of the Rings. You may not remember much about the story beyond them needing to destroy the ring, but you do remember almost all of the characters, even minor ones, and they often become fan favorites or just an individual that you really like and remember moments about. But aside from that, you kind of are along for the ride and you don't really remember the details of the story of how things are playing out. You just know that there's an overall plot and then there's the characters that are in the plot. Another example is Star Wars. A lot of people don't really understand the overall theme of Star Wars in the first place. Sure, the rebels are rebelling against the Empire, but they're not sure on the backdrop of what's going on or why the Empire is even evil. They just know, okay, Vader bad guy and green lightsaber good guy. And there are a lot of great characters, of course, but for the plot, things become very convoluted in Star Wars. And this is especially true of prequels, where the story was extremely political and had a lot of depth, but it's hard to follow. But sure enough, you remember Darth Maul, you remember Anakin, you remember these characters that are, sometimes, for example, with Darth Maul, he's in the movie for less than 5 minutes, yet he's an icon. Now, with Gone Home, the story feels very much for a younger type of audience. The two main characters are two girls who are bisexual or lesbian and are in love with each other. The characters are not very memorable because there isn't enough to expand on the characters at all. They have very little backstory, very little interactions, and very little anything because you're interfacing with the story in sort of a third person type look. You're not really even the character. You're another character looking at through the world through journal entries, and you're not really seeing them do anything. You're just reading, which, I mean, it sounds sort of like you can piece together the narrative, sure, but that's not a very good device and it's not very impactful for the characters. It's really just a short collection of memories that try to tell you things rather than show you things. This type of narrative really works for the younger crowd who have no experience with media in general because they can overlook things like this, and they may remember it because it's the only story they have really experienced. At the time of release, this game was extremely shilled by all the journalists, right? Game journalists everywhere were writing about this game. They were saying, oh my gosh, it's 100 out of 100, it's a fantastic game, it's 10 out of 10, games you must play before you die, and just critically, it was overwhelmingly, liked by critics. But then when it comes to the audience, the regular player, most people, despise it or pan it, and it's not really much to write home about. And there's a lot of, I would say, politics behind this game, but I won't go into it in general. I just think at the time where PC gaming was kind of interfacing with the internet in such a populist type narrative back in, 2010-ish, around this. This is really when people were getting onto PC for the first times, and gaining some sort of game, and so journalists were like, oh my gosh, you must play Gone Home. And of course, people just memed all over it, right? Actual enthusiasts of the hobby, they did not like it. But more about the story, going back to talking about it being for younger people in general, because one of the memories in specific mentions about respect and how her family did not respect her or her choice of being bisexual with Lonnie. Now, taken at face value, you think that, oh man, respect, that's right, it's about respecting another person. But as you get older and you become an adult, you realize that the game is really talking about the respect of a teenager in high school, which is pretty laughable. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that high schoolers aren't to be respected and you can't have a respect for younger people, but high schoolers don't really have the experience nor the knowledge to truly be respected in some of their rebellious decisions. So what I'm getting at is this game tries to make you sympathize with the main character, but it's really hard to do so when the character is a high school student who is claiming to be in love with another high schooler. It's a very cliche point and something people have seen even in their real lives. And the kid is being rebellious and getting into trouble, and it's really far easier to relate to the parents in the story trying to parent their child and live, their own lives and being adults. And again, like I said, this is really backed up by the main fact that Lonnie is a bad influence on the main character, Sam. Now, one thing I do like about the game is the atmosphere. I think the rain, soundtrack, and feeling is pretty great. It's not a horror game, but it does have some creepiness to it, right? Especially with the loud thunderstorms happening. And to be honest, I kind of like walking simulators, even though earlier I was talking about the genre being bad for video games. I honestly do kind of like walking simulators just because they're sort of relaxing. There isn't a whole lot of, intense anything going on. It's just more of a chill out and vibe type moment, which I think is good. But for video games, I don't really think they're good for gaming, and is what I'm trying to say. Even though I personally, guilty pleasure, I guess. The other bit I do like is about Lonnie joining the army. There's this plot point about Lonnie kind of having some emotional issues. She doesn't really have a good understanding of herself. She has a bad home life, stuff like that. And this just adds some depth, little depth that we get to any of the characters, right? And of course, girls usually don't join the military. But you see this from time to time in real life about a girl being very rebellious in school, having issues at home, having bad behavioral problems, and the solution is that, you could join the army to get, structure in your life. You could get a job for basically no experience, even though your pay is crap, but at the end of it, you're becoming something. You're getting a start in life. And the way this game ends, at first, I actually kind of like the ending, where Lonnie leaves for basic training in the army, and she is gone, right? And which does happen in real life, where, you join the military. It doesn't mean you just get to hang out with your friends after work, or that, after basic training you can keep up. Military life really is a whole new life, and you leave behind the people you knew, and people move on without you. So I think there was some depth here that they could have gone with, but the thing is that there's even a worse part, right? It's very frustrating to even describe, because the end of it is that she ends up not joining the army and refusing to get off the bus to go to training, right? Or she gets off the bus and leaves. She gets off the bus in Salem, which I'm not even sure why. Salem, I guess. Maybe that's somewhere near Fort Jackson or something. Maybe. I'm not entirely too sure. Maybe it was a different base at a different time. I don't know. But yeah, it's very frustrating that the one plot point that was good that I thought ends up resulting in her actually not going through with it. And then it actually gets worse, because the whole reason why the house is empty is that Sam has decided to go find Lonnie and run away and start a new life together, which is ridiculous. It's absolutely insane. Two high school age girls are going to go run away and live somewhere. And, I guess in this world, high school girls can just get an apartment and get a house. And no, of course not. I mean, are they going to be homeless? I mean, I have to say, it's like, oh, okay, so they're gone home. Is the home is gone? Is this what the plot point is? And it's not very good, I don't think. Ending is clearly poorly written. The story itself, again, going back, is not very captivating or interesting. There are some minor plot points that you can find out, and they're supposed to be like, oh, secret stuff, you can find, but you oftentimes just wonder, why do you care, right? This game feels like a game you could read about rather than experience. There is no experience about reading some things about the character and going, oh, by the way, did you know that this little tidbit about the character is so cool? For example, the husband and wife it's implied that the wife is cheating on the husband or going to or something like that. It's like, well, okay, this is kind of cool, but why do I care? I don't really know much about them besides what you've told me. I'm not invested in the character anyway. And again, this goes back to probably the main issue, is that in the way this style, the story style as written, is that the characters can't become memorable because they just aren't there. And speaking of not remembering things, in a year I probably won't even remember Lonnie's or Sarah's name, Sam. See, I can't even remember the main girl's name, Sarah, Sam, whatever, right? I can't even remember their names in a year, right? It may be even a month and I won't even remember them. So in conclusion, I guess, if you want to play this game, it's about 2 to 3 hours long, and there is no challenge to this. You just walk around the house like I'm showing you, and you interact with cassette tapes and you listen. Should you play this game? No, probably not. It's a 2 out of 5. There isn't really anything to Gone Home about, so thanks for watching.